He was standing completely still, facing his bedroom door, when he noticed the shadow underneath it stop moving. Not fade, not drift, stop. Like something on the other side had just realized he was watching. That moment happened to a man named Daniel Rourke in a small rental house in rural Tennessee on a Wednesday night in February, and what followed over the next 4 hours changed the way he understood fear, sleep, the human brain, and something far older than either of them. He has told this story only twice, once to a paranormal investigator, once to a sleep researcher at a university in Nashville. Both of them, from completely different fields, came to the same conclusion. And that conclusion is the reason you should never, under any circumstances, open your bedroom door at exactly 3 in the morning. Now, before you decide this is just another ghost story, stay with me. Because what is actually happening at 3 a.m. inside the human body, inside the brain, inside the nervous system, is something that science has only recently begun to map. And when you layer that onto centuries of documented human experiences, from cultures that have never even met each other, all describing the exact same thing at the exact same hour, you start to wonder whether the fear is irrational after all, or whether we have been wired, down to our biology, to be afraid of this specific moment in the night for a very specific reason. If this already has your attention and you want more stories that sit right on the edge of what we can explain, hit subscribe right now. This channel covers the kind of things most people feel but rarely talk about, and if what you've heard in the last 60 seconds already gave you a chill, what comes next is going to stay with you. Let's go back to Daniel. He was 34 years old, not the kind of person who believed in ghosts, not the kind of person who scared easily. He had served 2 tours overseas, came home steady, took a job managing a warehouse outside of Knoxville. He rented the house in February because it was cheap and close to work. It was an old farmhouse built sometime in the late 1800s, but he did not care about that. He was practical, he was tired, he wanted a bed and a quiet road. The first night, nothing. The second night, he woke up at 3:03 a.m. without any alarm, any sound, any obvious reason. He looked at the ceiling for a moment, then closed his eyes and went back to sleep. He thought nothing of it. The third night, the exact same thing. Eyes open, darkness around him, the clock reading 3:03. He sat up this time. The house was completely silent. No wind, no cars, no animals outside. He said later it was not the silence that bothered him. It was the texture of it. Like the silence had weight. Like it was pressing against the walls from the outside. He got up and walked to the bedroom door. Not because he heard something, not because he saw anything, but because his body moved before his mind gave the instruction. He stood there with his hand a few inches from the handle, and that is when he saw it. A shadow passing slowly underneath the door. Not a shadow cast by something walking by. A shadow moving the wrong direction. Moving toward the door from the outside, stopping, then spreading, like something had crouched down and pressed itself against the other side. He did not open the door. He stepped back, sat on the edge of his bed, and waited. At 3:17 a.m., 14 minutes later, the shadow was gone. He checked the house. Every window locked, every door locked, nothing disturbed, nothing out of place. And this happened again the next night, and the night after that, always beginning at 3:03. Now here is where the story shifts from strange to genuinely fascinating. Because Daniel, being practical, decided to research what was happening to him. Not from a paranormal angle, but from a medical one. He wanted to know why his body was waking him up at the exact same time every night with such precision. What he found opened a door he had not expected, pun absolutely intended. The human body runs on something called the circadian rhythm, which most people know as the internal clock. But what most people do not know is that within that rhythm, the body goes through a very specific and somewhat dramatic hormonal shift between 2 and 4 in the morning. Cortisol, the stress hormone, hits its absolute lowest point of the entire 24-hour cycle somewhere around 3 a.m. At the same time, melatonin is at or near its peak. The immune system is most active. The brain's glymphatic system, which essentially washes waste products out of neural tissue, is running at full capacity. The body temperature has dropped to its lowest point. Blood pressure is at its floor. In almost every measurable way, the human body is as physiologically vulnerable as it ever gets, right there, between 3 and 4 in the morning. Think about what that means. Your stress response is suppressed, your blood pressure is low. Your brain is essentially in maintenance mode. If your body is going to be surprised, overwhelmed, or caught off guard, this is the window. This is the moment your biology offers the least resistance. And your nervous system, somewhere deep and ancient and nonverbal, knows that. This is where the stories from history start to make a different kind of sense. Across cultures that have never shared a language, a trade route, or a continent, the hour between 3 and 4 in the morning carries the same reputation. In Japanese tradition, it is called the witching hour, the time when the boundary between the living world and what lies beyond it becomes thin enough to feel. In German folklore, 3 in the morning was called Die Geisterstunde, the ghost hour. West African spiritual traditions speak of the third hour of darkness as the time when ancestral spirits are most present and most communicative. Medieval Christian theology described 3 a.m. as the dark inversion of 3 p.m., which tradition holds as the hour of Christ's crucifixion, making the deepest point of night its spiritual opposite. These traditions were not talking to each other. They arrived at the same hour independently. That is not coincidence. That is pattern recognition across thousands of years of human beings noticing the same thing and deciding it deserved a name. The thing that makes this more than folklore is what sleep researchers have discovered about what happens to the brain specifically during this window. In the deepest stage of REM sleep, which tends to fall in that 3 a.m. range for most adults on a natural sleep schedule, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thought and skepticism, goes partially offline. The amygdala, which governs fear, threat detection, and emotional memory, becomes significantly more active. This is the biological state in which nightmares feel real, in which a sound that would be ordinary at noon becomes genuinely terrifying at 3 in the morning, in which a shadow under a door becomes something you cannot look away from. This is not weakness. This is ancient design. Your ancestors who woke up alert and afraid in the middle of the night were more likely to survive the predators that hunted in darkness. The ones who slept through everything were not passing on as many genes. Your fear at 3 a.m. is not irrational. It is inherited. It is 300,000 years old. But here is the part that the researchers Daniel spoke to could not fully explain, and this is the part that the community at Shadowlight Stories talks about in the comments more than almost anything else. Why, when people describe encounters in the night, whether they interpret them as spiritual, paranormal, or simply unexplained, do the most intense ones cluster so precisely around that 3 o'clock mark? It is not just Daniel. Sleep paralysis episodes are statistically most reported between 2:30 and 4 a.m. Documented poltergeist activity, when catalogued, spikes in that same window. Reports of intrusive presences, auditory hallucinations, and what researchers call hypnagogic experiences all follow the same curve. Every field that tracks these experiences, from neuroscience to paranormal investigation, finds the same distribution. 3 a.m. is the peak. There is a concept in neuroscience called threshold consciousness, the fragile mental state between sleep and waking where the brain cannot fully distinguish between internal and external stimuli. If you have ever woken up and been certain someone was standing in your room, only to have it resolve into a coat rack or a chair, you have experienced threshold consciousness. Your brain generated something real enough to believe. Now imagine that state overlapping with your body at its most biologically vulnerable. Your cortisol suppressed, your temperature low, your heart rate at its floor. What you perceive in that moment feels as real as anything you will encounter in daylight. Maybe more real, because nothing in your rational system is equipped to push back. Daniel eventually stopped waking at 3:03. Not because the shadow stopped appearing, but because he made a decision. He stopped getting up to check. He stopped walking to the door. He lay in his bed, noticed the feeling of alertness that arrived without invitation, and he stayed still. He told the investigator that the moment he stopped responding, the quality of the experience changed. It did not disappear, but it became less urgent, like something that had been pressing for acknowledgement and, not finding it, gradually lost interest. There is something profound in that, not just as a ghost story, as a statement about attention and energy and the ancient negotiation between what watches in the dark and what refuses to look back. Whether what Daniel experienced was neurological, spiritual, or something that does not yet have a clean category, the mechanism he discovered was the same one contemplatives and mystics have described for centuries. Do not meet the darkness with the same energy it arrives with. Stillness is not surrender. Stillness is the door that does not open. Think about the last time something woke you in the night. That specific kind of awakening where you did not know why, where the room felt different, where your heartbeat was already faster than it should have been before you were even conscious enough to feel afraid. What did you do? Did you reach for your phone? Did you get up? Did you lie there unable to move? Almost every person has that memory. Almost nobody talks about it in the daylight. We file it under strange and move on. But what Daniel's story asks, and what researchers on both sides of this question keep circling back to, is whether we should be paying closer attention to those moments rather than less. There are people who study this exact intersection of biology, psychology, and human spiritual experience for a living. Sleep scientists who became interested in why their data kept pointing to the same hour. Anthropologists who noticed the same hour appearing in cultures they had spent decades studying. They do not all agree on what is happening, but they agree that something is happening, that this particular window in the night is not ordinary. That the human body is different during it, and that human experience during it is different too, in ways that cannot be entirely explained by cortisol levels and REM cycles. The next time you wake up at 3 in the morning and your hand moves toward the bedroom door, you will remember this. And maybe, just maybe, you will choose what Daniel chose. To stay still, to breathe, to wait for 4 a.m. when the cortisol begins to rise again, when the body begins to warm, when the darkness starts its long retreat and the biology of fear slowly stands down. Here is what I want to ask you. Have you ever woken up at exactly 3 a.m. with no alarm, no sound, no reason you could name? Did it happen more than once? And did it feel different from any other middle-of-the-night waking in a way you have never quite been able to describe? Drop your experience in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you know someone who has their own 3 a.m. story, someone who has tried to tell it and been laughed off, share this with them. Because sometimes the most meaningful thing you can do for a person is hand them proof that what they experienced was real, was documented, was felt by others, and was worthy of being taken seriously. Some doors are meant to stay closed, not out of fear, out of wisdom.